So, welcome back. Today I'm joined by Matt Young from the Melbourne Meditation Centre in Australia. Hello, Matt.
Good
Um,
morning, Gerard.
Hi there. Yeah, and it's 6 o'clock where you are, and it's 7 p.m. where I am, which is always a bit of a kind of strange thought, really, isn't it?
Yes.
Um, yeah. I being in the UK, of course, for the benefit of anyone listening who wouldn't know that. Um, Could we start off by getting a little bit of your history, how you came to mindfulness, and anything in your life previous to that that you think might have contributed to, to you wanting to go in that direction?
Yeah. Well, when I was introduced, it definitely wasn't mindfulness in those days. It was meditation.
Yeah,
I don't. Mindfulness obviously existed. That term wasn't really used. Um, and I was actually uh, backpacking at the time around India. And I wasn't there at all because well, I hadn't gone to India with a prior interest in meditation or mindfulness. In fact, it was probably not on my radar at all. And I was only in India because I had been in the UK, and I loved it and didn't want to leave. But being an Australian, I wasn't permitted to stay beyond a certain length of time.
right.
Um, so I thought, oh, what's between the UK and Australia that I can explore? Um, so I ended up in the subcontinent, India, and I was at a train station in Varanasi. I think I was actually going off to see uh, the Taj Mahal, um, and I met a guy who said, when in India, you should try yoga. Um, and I really thought, why the hell would I want to do that? And because yoga wasn't something that was popular at the time either.
Yeah,
I kind of associated it with, circus acts and contortionists, and so, so I don't need any yoga. Um, but I something this guy said convinced me, and I ended up doing about 3 months of yoga, 5 hours a day worth, and that's where I was introduced to meditation.
you went
Um,
straight in at 5 hours a day.
5 hours a day, yes. We did 3 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon, or vice versa.
Right.
It sounds, yeah, from here it sounds very extreme.
Mm.
But
Mm.
I was on holiday or backpacking. I didn't have any commitments. I was young and um, it's just something to do.
Yeah.
um, I mean, well, that was the only option basically. That's what they did. I mean, it was an hour drop-in class. It was you were in India. That's what you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and yeah, so I think right from day one, um, at the end of the day, after all that yoga, we did half an hour's meditation. And the instructions were very simple. The teacher would say sit, then he'd say stay, and then he'd disappear downstairs, wander off, and leave us there for half an hour to meditate. Um, so basically left to our own devices.
And what
I
what
can't
did you
remember him
do?
saying, well, that's the thing. I don't really know what or remember what I did, but I do remember that I had some pretty intense experiences in the first 3 days. Remember finding it extremely uncomfortable physically because we've been sitting on cushions. We were sitting cross-legged, not in full lotus pose, but just on the floor. The floor was a kind of like a futon, so it wasn't a hard wooden floor, but it was as any to sit still will probably know it can be uncomfortable. Um, and so I found myself shaking uncontrollably and sweating, very hot, even though it wasn't that hot at the time. Um, and this intensified over the first couple of days to the degree that I actually was worried that I was going to spontaneously combust. I remember that was the thought that was going through my head. You know, if I keep getting hotter and hotter, I'm just going to burst into flames.
Right.
um, and so that was very compelling. You know, that was, I'm just sitting here on my butt. I'm not, why is, why am I, you know, shaking and sweating and, you know, steaming almost? I remember I felt like hot wax was just going to start kind of pouring out my ears. Um, and so that kind of, that changed the whole path or direction of my life, in that I became curious in what's going on here. What is this meditation? So I spent the next, you know, decade, just going along, attending every meditation class I could find, reading every book I could find, and it was book because there was no online stuff at the time, really. And so that was the kind of genesis, I guess, or the first stage. But I had to admit that after 10 years or so of explorations, I was still kind of none the wiser about what meditation was and how it worked. Because again, at that time, it was, or at least my exposure was mostly through Buddhism and yoga. That's where, you know, being in India, that's where all the information kind of lay.
Yeah.
Kind of secular, kind of, or even Western. I mean, there would have been some Western kind of teachers, but not that I came across at that time, and certainly not to the degree, you know, it wasn't as popular as it is now. But eventually I came across a book by Eric Harrison, who runs Perth, or the Meditation Centre in Perth. Was Do You Want to Meditate? And that was my first exposure to meditation written in plain English. Very clear, lucid, rather than mystical, esoteric kind of description of meditation. And based on, you know, what actually happens in meditation, the physiology or the physiological changes that occur. And so I read that and I was like, oh, wow. Now I get it. It was very clear descriptions of what happens in meditation, matched experience much more closely. So he was something I could really relate to and kind of connect with and understand, rather than scratching my head and going, what the hell are they, you know, really on about here? Because it was, you know, culture, my own language. And I think meditation really came together for me then. It's like, now I understand it. It makes sense. I can understand the mechanics, the underlying principles. I can kind of notice, or have a model, have a framework that kind of matches my experience and my world, my kind of worldview and paradigms. So that was, I remember I was really excited. I'm like, wow, yeah, here's someone who knows what they're talking about. So I went and studied with Eric in Perth, and then I came back to Melbourne, and shortly after set up Melbourne Meditation Centre based on that model, presenting meditation in a accessible, practical way with that kind of more Western rather than Eastern kind of presentation.
Yeah.
Because there really wasn't anything at the time. No one else in Melbourne was teaching in that way. It was either you had to go to a Buddhist centre or somewhere very new agey and esoteric to learn to meditate.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I see on your website, you said something that really strikes a chord with me about how meditation has a PR problem and it's associated with monks and bearded gurus and cross-legged yogis and pot-smoking hippies and all that sort of thing. And
Yes.
that kept me away from it for many years, thinking if it's for them, it's not for me, essentially. So
Yeah.
I think it's really, really good to be able to sort of take it beyond that to people who you know are put off by things like that. Was that foremost in your mind when you started the centre? You know, the your page is how we're different. Did you start off deliberately wanting to be different?
I wanted to I wanted to make meditation accessible. Um, and like you're saying, that means contextualizing it or presenting it in a way that's palatable to um, a Western audience, or a skeptical Western audience. And I think, even now, there's still, I'd say the bulk of people still have, or meditation and mindfulness have a PR problem for the bulk of people who are still associating it with, the hippies from, the 60s.
Yes.
There's, that's the stereotype, and you only have to pick up any article almost, or whether it's online or in a magazine, or an advertisement for meditation. It has someone sitting there cross-legged, with the mudra, and then you see that and you assume, okay, they're chanting some weird mantra, they're navel gazing, etc., etc.
Yeah.
That's still so common. Or just that they think it's about, blotting every thought out of your mind, and intuitively they know that's impossible for me, so I'm not even going to try it.
Yeah.
Um,
If there's somebody,
yeah.
if there's somebody who thinks all that, listening to this interview, what would you say to them?
Good question. Well, I'd say no. It doesn't. Well, that is one aspect of meditation,
Okay. Yeah.
but it's like, the analogy I often use is to compare it with either music or sport, and it would be like saying, pick an odd sport, like, I don't know, croquet or curling,
Yeah.
and so that's what sport is. Not realizing that there are, hundreds and hundreds of other sports that you can play, and find one that suits you. It's like people assume meditation is this one kind of practice. It's sitting still, focusing on your breath, trying to, stop yourself thinking. Whereas there are, again, hundreds of different ways of meditating, and there are ways that are, there are ways of meditating that will suit almost any person. Does that make sense?
It does
Is
to
that
me. Yeah.
a useful analogy?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the sport thing, definitely. I think that's a good analogy, I think. Yeah.
Hmm.
So you started this
Yeah.
meditation centre. How did you get that going? Because I ask from a very personal point of view, that we're starting
Hmm.
one at the moment, and we're very much in our early days. So I'm quite curious as to how you grew that, really.
Well, it grew very organically. First job, I worked for a long time on my website, kind of getting that right, figuring out, um, how to present myself. But I was very fortunate that I had the model that Eric Harrison was using in Perth, and he'd been using that for a couple of decades, and I guess had done a lot of the homework, or a lot of the work, and so I could kind of almost take that like a franchise, and just replicate what he was doing. So that was really helpful.
Yeah.
Then I searched for a couple of venues. Actually, I had venues around Melbourne, thinking that people would rather meditate locally than have to travel, across town. So I thought I'd do the travel. Found a couple of venues. Then I spent probably 2 months just driving around. Again, this was, even though I had a web, still kind of pre-internet popularity. So I went and stuck flyers and posters up on every notice board in town, and went into, all the massage and therapy places, and said, here, I'm starting meditation classes. So I kind of did a whole lot of legwork.
Yeah.
And then I remember with 1 week prior to the first scheduled class, I hadn't had a single inquiry. Not one person had rang me up or emailed me. And I'm like, oh, shit, this is terrible. All this effort and nothing's going to come of it. Um, but the week, 47 people or 46 people had registered for the classes. And I remember when the first registration came in, and it was sent in by mail in an order form. I was dancing around my lounge room. Hey, yeah! What a relief.
Sure, yeah,
um,
yeah.
and uh, that's the smallest term I ever had in terms of numbers. It just organically kind of grew from there. I was lucky to have um, Google was kind to me, and I was kind of result that came up on a Google search for meditation Melbourne, and so and then as the internet became increasingly popular, people would find me through there, and the longer you're around, the more word of mouth you have as well. So it just kind of I didn't had no intention. I'd never and still don't have any kind of growing the business. It just kind of grows, on it more or less. People approached me because they wanted to teach, so I started having other teachers working in other venues, and it just continues much like that.
And when you say you had 47 people signed up, what did you do with them? Did you have them all in one room, or?
No, that was three courses, so three venues.
Okay,
So
yeah.
there would have been roughly 15 in each place, and at that point it was a 7-week course that I was running. Again, it was based on Eric Harrison's model, and pretty closely at that time. I hadn't kind of developed my own kind of style, even though I had been teaching previously to that in various capacities. So and basically the course was modeled on his book Do You Want to Meditate, which was almost like each chapter became one, or the material presented in chapter 1 was the material we covered in week 1 and did meditations related to that. And so I had a little kind of template model framework there to work with.
Okay.
And then of course over the years, as you kind of that doesn't sit with me quite as well, or you come across new information, new ways of teaching and presenting, so things came out and new things came in, and it continually evolves in that way.
I've just had a glance at my bookcase, which is just next to me there at the computer, and Eric Harrison is one of his books was the first book I ever bought about meditation.
Right.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, it's called Teach Yourself to Meditate, and so
Yes.
I don't think I've ever come across anybody who's mentioned him until now, so that's quite curious.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So what? How long ago is this that you started the centre?
12. It was 2000, beginning of 2005.
Right,
So
right.
it's 12 years, really. Yeah.
Have you seen a lot of changes then over that time?
Yes. Yeah. Or as I said, mindfulness really wasn't in the public kind of mind. Very much meditation when I started. So mindfulness has come along, and I was still teaching mindfulness right from the start.
Yes.
It just wasn't called that. And like we were saying before, that stigma around meditation was much more prevalent. So when I started, the demographic was different too. It would have been 80 to 90% women attending courses, and they would have mostly been 30s, 40s, whereas now there's a much larger kind of demographic, many more men coming along, and both younger and older people coming along, a broader kind of demographic, but probably a little bit younger too, 20s and 30s. Um, so that's a big change. Um, and when I started teaching, it probably was, um, well, in a more traditional, yes. Uh, I think more and more people, mindfulness has had a big impact. It's even though I said I was teaching the same thing, I was teaching mindfulness back when we started. Um, the mindful approach, which is more around acceptance,
Mm.
um, has kind of had an influence, and I think that trend is continuing. It's not so much about trying to get to some particular state, but tolerate, accept, uh, learn from what you are experiencing.
Has that had an effect on how you run your courses, on the content of the courses, do you think?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, whilst what I'm teaching now is not, well, it both isn't. I was going to say it's not a world apart from what I was teaching 12 years ago. Um, there has been a significant development change over that time in my approach. For example, I incorporate what I call mindfulness of the body, or exercises or movement meditations in every class almost, and that's just catering to um, contemporary people who are invariably or usually relatively sedentary, office bound, and I find you kind of ignore the body at your peril.
Mm.
um,
Mm.
so yeah, people through movement, stretching, kind of practices, uh, um, in a mindful way. I think, um, if almost essential prerequisite, um, or a completely valid form of meditation in its own right. Um, at the very least, it's extremely useful. It makes it much easier for people to then sit and do a formal practice once they've kind of loosened up, physically a little bit. So that's something that I've added, over the years. And as I said, the emphasis is really, um, on, um, uh, learning to be with, particularly discomfort, a chaotic mind, um, uncomfortable or overwhelming emotions. That's the other thing, is there's a lot more people are coming because they're anxious, or highly stressed, um, depressed. So there's a more clinical or therapeutic dimension to, what's required of people.
Do you think um, that's a sign of a wider malaise in society?
Um, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, uh, probably, but where my uncertainty comes from is, I think, is it is it just a wider diagnosis, or a um, pathologizing of conditions that have been around for forever,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
or is it, you know that our society is becoming kind of sick in some way?
Mm.
Because
I
I can't
think,
remember
yeah.
anyone when I was at school, primary school, I wouldn't have even heard of the word anxiety. No one would have, um, kind of, identified or described themselves as being anxious, and I don't think even adults would have. But now, we work in schools because kids at, 8, 10, are anxious.
You're actually
Um,
working in schools, are you? Yeah.
yeah, from time to time, we do, stuff, yeah, with kids, and with the teachers.
Yeah, yeah. I bet the teachers
Mm.
need it sometimes. Um,
Yes, yes.
how is it working with children? Is there a different kind of response? Is there a different setup to the course?
definitely. Um, it's actually not my favorite area to work. Um, and I guess, I mean, my preference is to work with people who are self-motivated, who have decided on their, from their own needs to take up meditation. Whereas at schools, that's very rarely the case. It's kind of imposed upon them. So the well-meaning teacher says you guys should learn to meditate, um, and I guess they're kids at school, and they would probably rather be doing anything else than being at school in many cases. So it's
Yeah,
not
I remember
because
that
they're learning
feeling.
meditation. It wouldn't matter what they're doing. It's like
Yeah.
we could be doing something else. um, so and they often with the teenage years too, they're very, uh, or they can be reluctant to kind of open up and speak and share their experiences, which is really important in meditation if you're going to make kind of progress, and learn. So I find it's a relatively difficult and challenging area to
Mm.
work for me. Although I do know other people that love kids and love teaching, and probably find it a bit easier. Or that if you have a longer term relationship with the kids and can develop kind of rapport and trust over time. But that rarely happens.
Yeah, yeah.
But I get them doing the moving meditations, because they're desk bound and they need to move rather than sit. And then I usually get them lying down, um, and closing their eyes so they don't distract one another, or
Yes.
kind of look around thinking, what's going on here? This is a bit weird. Um, but I'm sure the feedback I get is, from some of them, they really appreciate it.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
um, but yeah, that without the self drive, the self motivation, I think it's it's suboptimal, I guess,
Yeah, yeah.
is one way to put it. Yeah.
So, is the centre a full-time thing with you now?
Yeah, that's my um, sole occupation.
Right. So, can you describe what a typical day, a typical week consists of for you in the centre?
Yeah. So I I spend my mornings typically, um, doing a bit of administrative stuff, tweaking. I'm continually kind of tweaking my website. Um, uh, Also, I still have a abiding kind of interest in meditation and mindfulness. So I have my own practice, and I do, yeah, a lot of reading and research, and also, um, writing, um, you know, new articles for the website. Probably, I've had a, I've been thinking I should write a book for a long time. So,
Oh, you
um,
should. Yeah.
I've yeah, um, yeah, I feel like I've got several books worth of material. And it's just a matter of kind of putting it back to, putting it all together in a coherent way. So that's kind of some of my time. And there's administrative stuff that inevitably any business owner has.
Mm.
And then I teach, a class on Sunday night, two on Monday night, and two on Thursday. And then I have various ad hoc jobs, schools, private clients, or consultation, and workplaces, corporate stuff. Um,
That's another area that
so
interests
yeah.
me. The corporate uh, side of things. Do you? Um, how is that as an experience? That strikes me as one of the sort of strangest meetings of two worlds, really, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah. That can on occasion be a little bit like working with school kids. Um, I'm not sure that came quite like it should. Um, but so a HR manager or someone that is, a meditator, invites me in, and maybe not everyone is. Well, actually, I think most people are attending those things voluntarily, but the work environment, depending on the workplace and culture, isn't necessarily conducive to taking any time out, or doing anything that isn't kind of productive. Or so people can struggle because they're in two minds or they're in two places. They're kind of trying to relax, but they think, oh, I've got to get back to work.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But that said, I've worked in places. Been, one place comes to mind where I've been probably there for 3 or 4 years, going in once a month to run a meditation session. And it is palpably in that workplace over that time. They value, and it's usually because the highest people, in the company are behind it. And I think when I'm going into a workplace like that, the whole culture is different, and you can yeah, actually it's amazing. It's incredible the difference in some groups where they've meditation, they're practicing, they have developed the capacity to kind of calm themselves down, or they can do that when required. So there's less stress. It's palpably a calmer, more pleasant environment to be in, and you can almost sense that just walking into a room sometimes. Whereas I go to some places where they're completely unfamiliar with meditation, don't have, and honestly, I just want to get out of there as quickly as I can. It feels unhealthy. It's a stressful, kind of agitated kind of place to be in. So I guess, yeah, it's kind of reassuring is not quite the right word, but it's affirming to see that there is a kind of obvious and palpable difference in places where meditation, mindfulness have become a part of the culture.
Sure, sure. I notice you, and indeed me, and I'm sure most people sort of seem to slip between saying meditation and saying mindfulness, and it leads me on to sort of wonder: is mindfulness a useful word? The advent of mindfulness into the language, has that been a good thing, do you think?
Um, like most of my answers, it'll be yes and no. Yes, in that I think it has made meditation much more palatable, because mindfulness, it's, as I often say, it's just meditation repeated, given that new term, which is much more neutral. It has less baggage that meditation does. It's not, typically associated with, as we said before, the sitting in lotus pose and chanting and Eastern culture, etc., etc. So it's very, in that regard, it makes meditation palatable to a whole new, broader range of people who would otherwise have dismissed it. On the other hand, it's a it's a bit of a muddy word. It has so many different definitions and aspects to it. It's considered a mistranslation of the Buddhist origins of the word. I mean, that's a lot of Buddhists mislike it, because they think it was kind of doesn't, but modern mindfulness or psychological mindfulness doesn't kind of capture the intent, or the original intent, from the kind of concept, if you like. But certainly, I run a meditation teaching training, and invariably during that course, someone will ask me, what is mindfulness? And these are people that have been, practicing for years.
Yeah.
But it's like, what exactly is it? So yeah, because there's no agreed upon definition, I think it leads to a bit of confusion. um, an unnecessary complexity. But we're kind of stuck with it, so
Yeah.
not much we can do.
Can you take me through your personal practice, what you do these days?
Yeah, um, it's actually at the moment I am uh, practicing um, a very what would you say? I'm really exploring one's capacity to stay um, 100% focused, which might surprise some people, because in the previous 5 or 6 years, I've been practicing more or less the opposite of that, and this is in that it's what might be called an open awareness practice,
Right.
where so so where I just sit with, I guess the intent would be um, just to notice, or just to allow um, my experience to unfold quite naturally. So, almost in a sense, to make meditation um, as minimally different, just to kind of sitting on the couch, because I can, if that makes sense.
Would that be what I would call choiceless awareness, or what some people would call
Uh,
choiceless awareness?
yeah, that's probably as close as you could get. I guess if you want to give it a name, although I don't like giving it a name, it would be recollective awareness, which is the name of a practice developed by Jason Siff, which I've been teaching and exploring, for the last 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
And so I guess it differs from choiceless awareness in that it's an anything goes practice. You can meditate in whatever way you like. You can do whatever you like. The added element is that typically you will journal afterwards. That's where the recollection comes in.
Okay.
So you're looking back, and so there's not so much emphasis on present moment awareness. It's recognizing you can develop awareness or mindfulness after the fact. You can remember what happened in the meditation, and by reflecting on that, you begin to develop greater awareness of how you relate to thoughts and emotions and whatever experience you're having, and how you can kind of navigate your way skillfully territory in meditations. So
Okay.
that's kind of been my primary practice.
Yeah.
But within that kind of container at the moment, I'm exploring the other end of the spectrum. So that's a very open, receptive practice. I'm exploring a much more right at the moment. Um, the capacity to just be hyper aware of when the mind wanders, which is not the kind of practice I recommend. I think that creates a lot of problems for beginners, because they tend to. So I find coming to this focus practice from where I am allows me to do it in a very kind of gentle way, rather than a very driven, self-critical way, which is, I think, typically that's what people bring to meditation in our culture, or relatively speaking, a driven, striving, effortful, want to get somewhere kind of
Mm.
attitude.
Well, it's what we're
Um,
taught to be like in the rest of our lives, isn't it? I suppose. So yeah.
yeah, and I think um, many people are coming to meditation with a certain degree of neediness, out of a crisis or a difficulty,
Mm.
a health problem, or increasingly stressed at work, family, um, and because there's that neediness behind it, as I want to get here, quick help,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
slightly that attitude, and that can influence the whole process. Um,
How do you deal with
yeah,
that when people come to you like that?
Um, well, I uh, very clearly, all right, I spend the first week of a course or a session talking about the main or addressing the preconceptions or misconceptions that people bring to meditation and all those kind of attitudes. Typically, people think they need to meditate for a certain time, so there's a kind of a drivenness to sit for, maybe longer than they need to, or that they should be perfectly still. There's a whole lot of high standards. My mind should be blank. I should be perfectly calm.
Yeah, yeah,
I should
yeah.
be able to remain still. I shouldn't get distracted. I definitely shouldn't fall asleep. So there's all these unrealistic and idealistic um, kind of standards or goals they're trying to, or they've brought to meditation, even if they've never done it before.
Yeah, yeah.
So I address that and say, if you fall asleep, great. That's you've relaxed. That's the first job in meditation. If you spend the whole time thinking in meditation, excellent. Well done. um, because that's what your mind does. Um, if you're distracted continuously, that's more or less normal. So it kind of normalizes all those things. So they're no longer berating themselves or
Yeah.
being self-critical for doing that. And a little kind of phrase I use is that in meditation, being focused is not nearly so important as being kind and gentle to yourself or with yourself.
Yeah.
And so when that's the kind of um, space or condition uh, or the kind of attitude you're holding the meditation within, then I think people will find that progress quite naturally and effortlessly. So again, without all that strife. Um, and again, that's a kind of cultural adaptation. I don't think that problem existed so much in the East or in the past, so they could kind of emphasize the more um, diligent, vigilant, effortful, kind of approach. Whereas our culture is already diligent, productive, effortful, striving. So the antidote in meditation is kind of go some way in the other direction, and then you can come back to, exploring, the more focused and concentrated aspects of meditation once you
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah, I'd never thought about that. That is, yeah, it is an adaptation that's been necessary because of the world that we live in, the Western world that we
mm,
live in. Certainly, yeah, yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah, and
that's really.
that's something that I feel strongly about, that meditation um, needs to be continually adapted to, the environment, the culture that we live in. And the fact is, even though we're now calling it mindfulness and it's, coming out of, research at Western universities, a lot of it is still true to its kind of monastic origins.
Mm,
There's
mm.
there's a lot of bag, if you like. So it hasn't truly adapted to that kind of modern psyche and those modern needs. Yeah.
Do you get how many people would you say go through the centre in a week, a month, a year, whatever's the easiest way to work it out is?
Yeah, we've got roughly 100 to 130 students each term. Where term is a 6-week course,
Right.
um, and we do 5 of those a year. So somewhere around 600 or 700 a year uh, through the courses, and then there's additional things, workshops, retreats, and the schools and corporates and stuff. Um,
Do you ever get
yeah.
do you ever get people who are given the sort of Buddhist nature of it and some of the stuff that goes on around Buddhism? Do you ever get people who are funny about the idea of charging for things?
Yeah, that's that's a kind of ongoing um, area of interest. Um,
Okay.
yeah, because yeah, in Buddhism, there's the idea of dana,
Mm.
generosity. So that you might have heard of the popular Goenka 10-day Vipassana retreats, which
Mm.
many people are introduced or thrown in the deep end when it comes to meditation.
Yeah.
And that's, apparently, they say, we don't charge you for it. But you can volunteer to give money at the end, so the next lot of people can do it. So there's that kind of concept. And I think it's a bit disingenuous because you can't really run anything in the modern world without, receiving money in some shape. Um, and it confuses people too. I mean, when you do offer something for free or on a donation basis, they often have no clue what to pay. Um, or guilty because they didn't pay enough. So it doesn't seem like in transaction to me, or as just saying this is the fee, come along if you want. But then on the other hand, it has the benefit of some people legitimately can't afford maybe what you ask for a course, and so it's nice to be able to um, teach those people that maybe otherwise couldn't. So yeah, I find it's kind of a confusing territory.
Mm.
um,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. Again, that's two different cultures meeting, and
Yes.
uh, yeah, two
Yeah.
different paradigms. But
Yeah. Do you
mm.
do you still do you see it? I mean, obviously, given your everyday experience, do you think it's still growing? There's obviously been a big boost. Do you think that is continuing?
I think it will, and it's like the stock market it goes up and down. Um, I've had a relatively or a slightly quieter year this year than in the previous couple, where the growth was quite steep. And some of my colleagues here in Australia have noted the same thing. Um, but yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, I think we're only really tapping into still a relatively small percentage of the population. Um, Thinking of the growth in yoga, I mean, yoga is almost, um, it seems to saturate um, our culture now. I mean, you can go to a yoga class at every gym
Mm.
in the country,
Mm.
um, and there are dedicated yoga studios in not just every suburb, but almost every block. Um,
Yeah.
and as I said, when I was a kid, yoga didn't exist. In my town, there was no yoga.
Yeah.
um, so I think mindfulness, um, it mightn't get to the same place as yoga, but I think it's on a similar trajectory. Um,
Mm.
I mean, yes, in the States, the rise of the kind of um, uh, the meditation studio. I think there's a place I just was yesterday, Inscape in New York, which is they've got these wonderfully designed rooms with little pods to meditate in, and kind of it's not just your community hall, let's say. It's a dedicated
Yeah.
and actually same in Melbourne, there's a couple in Melbourne as well. They're really elegant, kind of high end, if that's the word, spaces.
Mm. Mm.
uh, the rich and famous meditators go.
Yeah. So.
So that's a whole different um, the fact that those things can exist suggests that meditation is growing in new ways.
Yeah. And long may it continue to do so. Um,
Mm.
Thank you ever so much, Matt. That was absolutely fascinating and very
Oh,
inspiring.
great.
So if people want to come and see you, they go to melbournemeditationcentre.com.au. Uh,
Hey.
and take it from there, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, and as I say, thank you so much for doing it at this time of the day for you, because whilst that may be normal for you, it's still the middle of the bloody night for me. So there we go. So yeah, thank you ever so much, Matt. Much appreciated, and yeah, thank you for your time.
My pleasure, Jared.
Thank you.